New South Wales Transport Minister Andrew Constance has described how the political bubble has burst for him. He's experienced the bushfire crisis firsthand when he was forced to defend his own property on New Year's Eve. Danica di Giorgio spoke to the member for Bega earlier this week about his political future and started by asking him about the difficult recovery effort.
Well, the recovery is starting to get into full swing, despite the fact that we've got coastal communities still under fire threat. So, you know, it's a tough situation where ultimately we've got to be mindful of the anxieties that communities are feeling with hot weather around the corner, and then at the same time getting on with recovery. And look, it's going to be a great recovery. I'm very confident now that we're starting to see those green shoots. The big thing, of course, is the clean-up and removal of quite literally hundreds of thousands of tonnes of debris. Once that starts to happen, it gives everyone a little bit of hope, and you know, ultimately we're going to start to see that. There is no doubt that certainly in terms of the regional approach with waste and debris, that's what's been worked on, because local tips just can't handle that. In fact, we've got 2 tips at the moment under fire threat. So there is no doubt that it is going to be a very big logistical exercise, both from the waste management side of things, and that's why we just had to be patient over the last couple of weeks while this all gets arranged, and I'm very confident the community is going to have some important news soon in terms of progressing the clean-up.
Number of residents that we've spoken to on the ground, they've become quite frustrated with a lot of red tape, particularly surrounding a number of grants, including business grants. How and when can they see some money, some help? Well,
I think the key point is that we are going to move to a case management approach. So Service New South Wales will put in place case managers to get through this maze, and it is ridiculous. I mean, everyone's trying to do their best, but we've got to remember there's so many different entry points to getting support. And, you know, I'm hearing complaints about people having to register 3 times. That's absurd. People have lost everything. They don't have documents. There's a lot of frustration. So it's got to be kept in mind that certainly through middle bureaucracy that be mindful of that people have lost everything. And they can't just keep re-registering and all of these types of things. That's important. Also, the charities, I think one of the advantages that we now have, having had them in my car on Saturday, is they are going to better coordinate what each other is doing. I mean, ultimately the $10,000 grant or the $10,000 amount for people who've lost everything is great through Red Cross, but there's monies available through Salvos and St Vincent's de Paul, which again are designed to help people who might have lost a water tank but not lost a home. It's that type of assistance which people are also seeking. So I'm hoping we'll start to see a better coordination from the charities as well.
In terms of mental health, what sort of support has been available for fire-affected residents or residents in general in these areas?
Again, it's an area which has got to be, you know, worked on and more agile. It's got to be a soft approach, so it's not a case of just having them available in recovery centres in terms of that support. People have to go out and do the outreach. I think it'll be very telling with schools going back, because the trauma counselling through schools will be key, and that will also pick up mums and dads, I suspect, as the littlies get back to school. So this is going to be an ongoing challenge right through the whole recovery process. And it's something which everyone's got to be mindful of, because I think with the very nature of this disaster, there's the trauma, the post-traumatic stress, then the depression, and we've got to be very mindful that everybody's going to have a different pathway through this and a different response.
A number of people we've spoken to over the last few days have credited you for your leadership during this crisis, and they've said it's been so nice to see a political figure actually show some human love and gratitude on the ground. What do you say to that?
Oh, I'm humbled by that feeling, but it's not about me at the moment. We've got to get everyone, you know, off their knees, and we're not there yet. I mean, we've got people still walking out of the bush west of the highway. We've got isolated communities where they've lost everything. It's just not those main centres. So I'm worried about localities in and around Kaya, Bemboka, Korma. So, you know, for me, it's not about the politics now. We've got this humanity here, which is, you know, lovely to see, with people drawing strength from each other and caring for each other. It wouldn't matter if it's a country lane level through to, you know, a surf club or a local community organisation. People are pulling together and It's very easy representing people who do that. But at the moment, I just see my role as an advocate and working alongside people and making sure that those who are falling through the cracks are supported.
How are you? How are you coping?
Well, I mean, every day as it comes at the moment. But look, I've got loving family and friends, which is important. I've got loving neighbours, people who are just coming together. I'm drawing strength of people who, are inspirational in terms of how they're responding to this. And that's a nice place to be. I'm in the political bubble, quite frankly, for me, burst 3 weeks ago when I realised that, politics gets you thinking in a particular way. It's not always a good way. And ultimately now, I'm looking at life very differently because life changed for me. I mean, I went through the fire front, survived it. Like so many different stories are coming out. But I'm also very mindful that there's people who've lost everything, there's people who've lost loved ones, and we've got to rally behind each other and keep going, and that's what country people do. And I think this is an incredible example of that. We want to have the best recovery in the world, and we're now starting to take those steps.
Early on, you were quite critical of the Prime Minister. He wasn't here on the ground when the fires came out. Do you think that your federal colleagues have stepped up to the mark?
Look, I think the big thing which everyone expects is tiers of government, local, state and federal, to work together. And that's really important. And if there's connection there with people in the community, that's what matters most. Everyone is doing their best at the moment. And I think that's the heartening thing. As long as it's well coordinated and Dick Adams, Andrew Colvin are well supported in their recovery efforts, along with people like Mick Willing and Mark Prendergast, who are driving the New South Wales bureaucracy, coupled with the incredible leadership of Shane Fitzsimmons and Gladys Berejiklian. I think that's what is going to really make this. We have to remember though that people are going through this pace of recovery very differently. We have to remember though that we've still got active fire. And that brings back enormous anxieties if you've been in a burnt-out area versus ultimately those who are under threat. And, I still saw active fire on the weekend, and we've got hot days ahead. So, I'm very concerned. We've got another 2 months of fire season at best, and that alarms me because I really don't want to lose any more lives. I suspect, unfortunately, we're going to lose more homes, and we've got to be set for that. Prepared for that, and we've got to continue to support all our emergency service personnel, particularly our Royal Fire Service volunteers, many of whom have lost homes.
Would you like to see the Prime Minister do more?
Look, I think that the key thing is that tier of government, the hard, cold reality is that, federal government doesn't necessarily operate, very close to communities like local and state agencies do. So, no doubt his deployment of the Army has been well received. And now that they've got this $2 billion, they invariably will start to hopefully spend that very aggressively. We are going to need to consider an infrastructure housing-led recovery, and that's not about me jumping up and down and saying, build us a new dual carriageway to the Victorian border and the Princess Highway or a new hospital. Those things just need to be part of the process in terms of recovery so that we can get jobs, so we can get money back into people's pockets, and that then flows through to our small business community in particular. And some of our industries, it wouldn't matter if it's the timber industry or the dairy industry or our seafood industry or our tourism industry. These are industries which are important to keeping local economies going and small business going and schools going, and it just flows through. So look, for me, I think ultimately the more people are ploughing in here to help, it's important.
What's next, really? What's next for all these towns? It's still very active, as you said, but what is next?
Well, look, I think that, again, it's got to be a multifaceted approach. We've got to be mindful of the communities under threat still versus getting on with recovery and starting to get the place cleaned up. The Army and SES and councils are working around the clock. It's great to see, and it's good to see the arborists, and we're starting to see some of the excavators in, which is heartening. But we will then see it really massively step up over the next 3 months, and that will be really heartening for people to see that. At the same time, ultimately what we can do to try secure and support our small business community. That's something which is really important. You know, we are seeing businesses which have been running for 30 years now folding because of the seasonal impact which we lost our summer season. It's the most profitable time of year for many in our community, and that's gone. So there's a second wave of disaster on disaster here in that sense. So, look, my belief is that you know, we can't underestimate our own resilience and determination, and there's a lot of heart round. And I think, you know, ultimately, if everyone works together. The other big thing which I think's really shown up through this natural disaster is the way it's brought people together. It doesn't matter your politics or your outlook philosophically. Everyone has just come together because it's been about survival. Which is why, you know, in terms of the big debates that are happening, everyone just needs to be mindful at the moment. I'm zeroing in on every individual who's contacting me, and you know, I'm not going to lose sight of that. And that's what we can't do through recovery. It's got to be about bringing every person with us, regardless of their circumstance. And that's something which is really important. The other thing is we still need the donations to flow and the generosity to flow, because people have gone through such enormous hardship. And the scale of it, the sheer scale of it, is unknown until you come and actually look at the hundreds of kilometres of devastation. It's not just a case of it being in an isolated town or community. It is widespread, and the pictures don't do it justice in that sense.